So the reason why we do the State of the School Address is because, like the State of the Union, which I know is this evening, and I'll try to get done before that, believe me. I'm not trying to compete with President Obama, because he's much more intriguing. So, the reason we do the State of the School Address is there's always one night a year that hopefully what we'd like to do is have one night a year where parents can come. If you're a busy parent, you've got other things going on, if you want to come one night a year, you can always count on State of the School Address to provide information about what we're currently doing in the classrooms, what our future goals are, and just what we've been working on during the past year. And I see a lot of familiar faces from previous years, so hopefully the State of the School is catching on. It's year 3, we shall see. My name is Jessica Edgar. I know most of you, some familiar faces of students. Thank you, teachers, for coming out and supporting our PTO and myself, too. It's nice to see familiar faces. Not to mention the jeans passes that you're going to get. It's not bribery. That's called an incentive. We do that here. But my name is Jessica Edgar. It's my 3rd year here as the principal of Basha Elementary School. I absolutely love being the principal here, and hopefully through this presentation you can see why it's exciting to be here in the Chandler Unified School District. So go ahead and get started. So there's 4 things we're going to talk about this evening. We're going to talk about some instructional strategies that may be new. They may just be something that we've done previously, but bringing it to your attention again. Some of the resources we have, our culture here at Basha Elementary School, and the future. We always like to start off, or I always like to start off with Journey 2020, because truly it is a district vision that by the year 2020 that we have academic excellence, outstanding staff at every school as well as the district, effective resource management, and a culture of success. And I have a team of teachers. Ms. Cindy Upshaw's a 2nd grade teacher, and Mrs. Samantha Carlson's a 4th grade teacher, as well as myself. We are the Journey 2020 team for Basha. Every school has a Journey 2020 team, but it's to ensure that these items are addressed every school year, not just at an individual level, that also that the information is disseminated to the staff members too. So we do discuss what is our Journey 2020 plan, what are our goals, what can we do as teachers and educators to make sure that students understand what they're learning and that they can be assessed and that they're showing growth on their assessments. And that we're having fun too. I typically show this graph because I just find it very amazing. It does relate to outstanding staff for Journey 2020. This is Bob Marzano is one of the leading education researchers, and this is an older study from 2003, but that big blue bar on the left-hand side shows you when you have the right teacher, the percentage gain in 1 year can be a 52% growth. So the reason I always bring this up, and every year I try to show this graphic, because I want to share with you how we place students here at Basha Elementary School. We have a very unique, every grade level is very unique. Every teacher teaches a little bit differently, but by design. Because the way that I have 4 children, and each of them learn very differently, and what may work for my 11-year-old is not going to work for my 8-year-old, because they just learn very differently. So we have different teachers at each grade level that present information differently, like we said, by design. In the beginning of May, actually early April, you'll get an email from your teacher, or you can always come to the front office. We have environment request forms, which is one piece that we look at when we do place students. Because we want to make sure that when we place a student, we're thinking about even our incoming students, how do they learn best? So we take that into consideration, as well as we invite the team. So if your child's currently a 1st grader, it's the 1st grade team meets with me, as well as Mrs. Leber, our English language development teacher, as well as special education, as well as anybody that's involved that touches this child. We meet early May, and then what we do, we sit at a conference table for sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, however long it takes, to make sure that we have looked at the classes, that we're meeting the needs of your individual students' instructional, the way that they learn best from that teacher. So we really try to match up student and teacher in the way that they learn, so we can get the most for your child, so that they can learn, they have that opportunity to learn that year and have a great year. Sometimes we don't get it right, and that's when I need your help and the teacher's help. And then sometimes there are some movement to make sure that your child does have that opportunity to grow and make those gains. 90% of the time we have it right, but sometimes we don't. But it is a process, and I want to share that with you, because sometimes I think the community feels that we may have just chosen this particular teacher just because, but there's a lot of thought behind it. So if you ever have a question about the placement, we want our children to have this opportunity and to make those gains. So please always come to me, come to the previous teacher, and we can answer those questions for you. But outstanding staff is something we do have at Basha. It's quite amazing to see the dedication. There's several teachers here tonight. I didn't require them to be here, and I really don't think the Jeans Pass really made them come tonight. Don't say anything if that's really the reason you came here. But I think they want to be here to see what I'm presenting, because I haven't given this presentation to the staff, but they're the ones carrying this out. But I can say, in my years, this is my 9th year being a principal, 11th year in administration, we have an awesome staff here at Basha. So if I don't say it enough, thank you to my awesome staff that's sitting right there, and up here, and a little everywhere else. So we talked a little about academic excellence, and this is actually an old visual, because if you look at the SMART goal, the Journey 2020 team, what we do is we look at our data from the previous year. Data being classroom data, being AIM scores, AZ merit scores. As you know, we took our AZ merit last year, which is that big question mark of how are we going to do? How are the kids going to do? Are they going to change the scores at the state? Are they going to change cut scores? So really, just so you know, we are still in A school. We'll continue to keep that label until next year. So 2016-17, we should have a different label from the state. The state decided that they were going to keep the labels for all the schools while they decide where those cut scores will be. Our district assessment director is actually an executive. There's a long title, I can't remember what it is, but he's very intelligent, can look at this data and just tell you where we're going to be. And he was right on the money. He came out to the staff last year and said, okay, AZ merit scores are going to be lower than the AIM scores. Just be prepared. It's going to be across the state, across the board. Here's the percentage drop. But now we have a better idea of what those AZ merit scores look like, what they're looking at. And it's not, at Basha, that's not the only thing we look at. We look at the whole child. We look at the cultural piece. And when I say culture, the school culture. How are we assessing, or how are we, what are we doing here that's also assisting this child become a productive member of society, which we'll get to in a subsequent slide. But just want to share with you, we still have decided to focus on number sense as our SMART goal, because that does make up a large portion of the math assessment, the AZ merit. I believe it was about a 30 to 45% of the AZ merit test, don't quote me because it changes, it's like a moving target, is regarding number sense. But if you really think about it, everything you do mathematically, you need to have that number sense. So across the board, looking at some of the older data, we have some newer data now, which I'll share with you a little bit later, leads to, we need to work on our number sense. So we have continued that goal. So along with academic excellence, we do have some instructional strategies that I do bring up every year. Not every year. We started in January of 2014. We introduced thinking maps, and we have several trainer of teachers. And what happened is the staff, those trainer of teachers, introduced it to the staff, and we've continued really becoming a thinking map school. Because if we can hang our hat on one thing, I mean, there's plenty of schools out there, there's charters, there's privates, and there's public, but I can tell you something about Basha teachers is that they are using thinking maps with fidelity. When you walk through the hallways, you will see thinking maps as well as wonderful art masterpiece projects on the board. But thinking maps, what they are, they're graphic organizers that allow students to determine let me rephrase that. They're graphic organizers, but they don't tell the students what to do. They allow the students to choose amongst these 8 thinking maps, how do I want to organize my thoughts? And it's developmentally appropriate. I have one example from a student that's in one of our self-contained programs, which is really pretty awesome. There's a circle map, and then there's a flow map. So it really does naturally differentiate for the various students that we have here on our campus. And this is the brainchild of Katie Bailey, who's sitting in the audience here, as well as Marcy Carrasco and Samantha Carlson. They said, hey, I think when you walk in every year, we should have a tree map, which is one of the thinking maps, classifying who are your teachers and in what grade level. So this is a tree map that classifies, and if you look at the left, it'll show you the classifying is the tree map. And it's just our families. We are trying to update the pictures because some families have grown and some teachers have moved, but every year we're going to try to have a tree map up there or some type of thinking map just to say, you know what, you walk in and we want our students to think, so we're actually going to model this for them as well. some more thinking maps, and I really wish the lights were a little bit dimmer, only because they're pretty amazing. On the left-hand side, we have a flow map, and if you see, it's got 13. You like that? I counted in front of you. 13 boxes. It's a flow map. So what it is, or what this particular flow map is about, and Ms. Carrasco, I didn't know you'd be sitting here, but it happens to be from a 5th grader in her classroom. They read a story every week. I'm sure you're very familiar with that. Sometimes it's not every week, but typically it's every week. And what the flow map does is it sequences the events. So the child is not necessarily always given an assignment to, let's do a flow map. It's, what thinking map could you use? And then they think, well, what do I need to do? I need to sequence. What's sequencing? That's a flow map. So that was kind of neat. It's about James Fortin. So if you have a 5th grader, Charles, you probably remember that story very well. On the right-hand side, from, I believe this might be Mrs. Lee's classroom, a 4th grade teacher, who I believe is also in attendance. This is a double bubble, which compares two different things. And then as you can see, right next to the double bubble is actually the writing. So it lends to writing, which is pretty neat. And we'll get into what I'd like to do in the future as well with thinking maps and writing. So focusing back on math, because looking at all of our assessments, state assessments, classroom assessments before we had our assessment system that we got this year, is today's number. This was last year's instructional strategy for math. It is a math instructional strategy that is research-based by NCTM, the National Council for, there's a T in there, mathematics. It's NCTM standard and strategy. But what today's number is, it's allowing students to identify how to make 96 various different ways. So you see all the sticky notes. Every single child has been engaged in creating the number 96. Now, there's a circle map too, which incorporates the thinking maps. However, on each sticky note, you can see even from there, even though you can't make out what it is, you can see all the different drawings. So we have tally marks. We've got addition problems, some subtraction problems, word problems. So it's pretty neat that the kiddos can differentiate, and it gets every child engaged. And if you only know tally marks, you're able to participate. If you are trying to do multiplication, you're like, oh, what can I do to make 96? What's that multiplication table? Then the child can challenge themselves as well, along with wonderful teachers guiding them through this process. So that was last year's strategy that we're still carrying out through several different classrooms. Kindergarten does it all the time, which is developmentally a wonderful thing for them to do. And now this year we focus on a different NCTM strategy, which is called alike and different. So alike and different, it takes two different numbers, and you compare them also using the sticky note strategy where every child is engaged, they're being given the opportunity to show what they know. I say that often. Show what you know and be engaged and stick up their contribution to alike and different. What is alike is in the middle, and what is different is on the opposite sides. So this is like a double bubble, so it's also thinking that. And that's just some really cute students doing this. Now what I want to show you is a clip from Miss Amy Upshaw's class. And there's a couple things, there's 3 segments. It's actually a 10-minute clip that we're not watching in its entirety. We're going to watch a few seconds here and there. The first clip that we're going to show you, and Holly's so graciously, I should say, queuing that up for us, we're going to show the learning goal and scale piece. How many of you have had your child come home and talk about learning goal and scale? We'll work on that. Teachers, we got work to do. I know that my kiddos, because they do go to Champaign Unified School District as well, and it's a district-wide piece to the evaluation and just how kids learn best. If they're able to identify what they're learning about, they're going to make the connection of, oh, this is what I'm learning, and here's what I'm learning about, and here's how it applies to real life. So the learning goal and scale piece, we're going to show Mrs. Upshaw for about 20 seconds. I think we might have missed it, but that's okay. We're going to go to the next little piece. That's okay. I think it might be my writing. Okay, if we don't see learning goals and scales,
the numbers we're comparing today are 893 and 398. So go ahead and write the two numbers on your board.
And go back a little bit. So it's not the learning goal and scales piece. I gave her the wrong time. But this is actually the alike and different piece. So this is where she's showing the warm-up for alike and different, And you get to see how she presents it to the class first.
The numbers we're comparing today are 893 and 398. So go ahead and write the two numbers on your board and start to compare them with a double bubble. 893 and 398. Got it?
All right, while we queue for the next snippet, the reason I want to show that, cute little second grader, is because I want to show how it was addressed as a warm-up activity and also to show that every child had an individual whiteboard. That's something that we are working towards here at Basha Elementary School, is to increase engagement. I think we do a really good job of it, but Mrs. Upshot definitely does a wonderful job of having those whiteboards in students' hands, making sure that they are engaged in what is being said, because if you don't have that, there's no connection being made. And it's pretty interesting as we keep going through, and I hopefully wrote down the right numbers for Holly, that you'll see that every child is actually writing something down that is aligned to that learning goal. So now you're actually going to see the part where it is alike and different, where they get to put up that post-it note.
All right, find one of the similarities or differences, write it on your post-it note, and add it to the class double bubble. When you're finished, you can come back to your seat and write your frame of reference. Pick one that you think maybe someone in the class has never seen before. Something different. No, you can do that when you're done, Jackson. When you go back to your seat, you can add your frame of reference. Okay? So pick one of your similarities and differences and write it on your post-it note.
This is editing from Mrs. G.
Takes them a long time sometimes. 3 minutes worth.
Our second graders don't really sound like that.
I should take 3 minutes. In 20 seconds.
Put it where you think it belongs. They both have the same numbers, or they both have the same numbers.
And now we're going to push it forward where Mrs. Upshot's going to show the different student work underneath the dot camera and what the discussion looks like.
All right, let's take a look at a few of them. Okay, all right, I took these off the board. All right, it looks like Lisa says that 893 has 800s, 910s, and 3 ones. Is that how they're the same or how they're different? Different. Very good. Very nice. And Reese did it with place value discs, right? Okay. So she has 800s, 910s, and 3 ones. She said there's 89 10s in all. Oh, she looked inside the hundreds and saw that the hundreds have some 10s, right? Okay. Is that how they're the same or different? Different. How about 893 is greater than 398? That's how they're different. Very good. Okay. All right.
They're very enthusiastic second graders. Very, they clap for everybody and everything. So Cindy, good job on creating a positive environment for your kiddos. So that's just a snippet of what happens in the class every day. Of course, it's presented a little bit different, and it may not be every day. I misspoke. But they also use that, teachers use that for mathematics as well as English language arts. I know today Mrs. Rashawn's class was doing alike and different for Aesop's Fables, so it happens often. But I think it's important that you get to see a little snippet of what we see in the classroom too. So we talk about different differentiated instruction, actually the first piece right there, I talked about assessment. So have your children talked about, to you, our benchmarks? Yeah, our ATI Galileo benchmarks. Okay. So for kindergarten through 6th grade, they've had a pre-test during first quarter. Second quarter, there was an assessment not for kinder or first grade, just 2nd through 6th. But what that is we finally have a system, and I've been talking about it for a while, for 2 State of the Basha addresses, about having an assessment system in which the students are benchmarked very regularly, and we can identify areas where we can accelerate, enrich, and also areas in which we can intervene. Because we do have an RTI model, which came up there, which is response to intervention. So if your child is in need of intervention, these assessments assist. It's one piece of the data that we look at to say, what does this child need to intervene? What gaps can we fill, and how can we do that? There's 30 minutes set aside every day for response to intervention. Your child may not need intervention, but if they do, they're receiving that intervention through looking at classwork and teacher observations, as well as the benchmark piece. But also, something that's kind of interesting too is if your child is not in need of intervention time, there's also what we call stretch groups. This is something new that we're doing. So we're getting there, but that's the opportunity for those children that need an opportunity to be enriched instead of intervened, to have that opportunity to do something like a reader's theater, or do some type of STEM activity, or problem-based learning. So that is something new as well, to meet the other end of the spectrum for those students that may not need the intervention. So that's the total school cluster grouping. It's actually a wonderful book that talks about the students and children and other ways to enrich and accelerate. But something that's unique to Basha is we're the only K-6 school at this time in Chandler who has gifted cluster classrooms. And what that means is that we have teachers, currently Ms. Olson, Mrs. Boyd, Mrs. Northrop, as well as Mrs. Rashawn. They're all, Mrs. Olson's working on getting her endorsement or her certificate, but they're all gifted education teachers. And they're gifted education teachers, so what we try to do is cluster those students that are gifted identified. Some parents don't want their child that are gifted identified going to a full gifted class where all the children are all identified gifted. They would prefer to have them at their home school in a mixture of class, but also knowing that they're going to receive a little bit of a different education to meet the needs of that learner. So that we do have a gifted clustering group. It's kind of interesting. Our teachers are going to go to Knox Gifted Academy and just have a dialogue with the teachers on the 21st of January that morning. So if your child's in one of their classes, they won't be there, but we have quality subs in there. But just to have that dialogue to make sure that we do a really good job of identifying some of those kiddos that need intervention, but we need to do an even better job of extending some of those learning opportunities for our students that are identified gifted or that aren't identified gifted and just can take on that critical thinking piece. Some instructional resources. This is nothing new. This is our 2nd year using the Journeys ELA books, and I will tell you that it's a little bit easier this year, less rocky. As a parent who uses Think Central, it's gotten a lot better. So our teachers are very, not very used to, but they're used to this curriculum now. It's year 2. We also started something a little bit new this year by volunteer. All of our teachers are involved in Define STEM. It was actually a voluntary-based computer program that gives teachers ideas about how to incorporate STEM into the classroom. And all of our teachers here at Basha Elementary School said, we want to be involved. So when they're out of the classroom, 9 times out of 10, it's an instructional, professional development that they're going to at what we call the IRC, our Instructional Resource Center. Just so you know, our teachers are not sick that often, but there are some different classes that they're taking so they can serve your child better. And one of them this year was Define STEM. So you will see some STEM activities in the classroom. I know Mrs. Lee's class, I was invited to a presentation where she incorporated the science of recycling with the math. They had to make a presentation with a jingle. It was super cute for these 4th grade students. But they had to say how many bears equal the amount of cans Americans throw away in a year. So there was that mathematics and science piece, which was really neat, and the kids were excited. So I'm glad that all of our teachers volunteered to be a part of Define STEM. I put this up here because currently for math, we're undergoing an adoption process. So next year there will be a new math adoption, so that will be a resource. I put the heart with math because I don't know what it's going to be. It's kind of a question mark, but we love math. We're still teaching math, obviously. We do bring in some of the Scott Forsman and Wesley piece as well as Engage New York, so we kind of are doing a blend at this point in time, but next year we'll have a better resource to teach our kiddos. Communication. I like to bring up communication because last year I remember in our parent surveys, which is our first triangle point right there, the parent surveys came back fairly poor. I think it's important that we share some of those pieces, like where we need to get better. We do a lot of things really well, but last year the parent surveys stated that we did not communicate very well. So this year what we've done is you've seen that we've updated all of the teacher web pages, and that was not just Basha Elementary School, that was a district initiative as well to make sure that we were meeting all the different ADA compliance pieces for our web pages, but it also gave the teachers another option, another look at their web page and time to refresh and hopefully renew any energy if they're techies and they want to update that. Also this year we have the Basha app, which is a PTO sponsored app. If you don't have it, I suggest you do, especially if you have a bus rider, because when the buses are late, that's typically what we try to do is the app first, because parents get it right away with push notifications, and then our web page. This year, it's a pro and a con. Sometimes you communicate too much, but you don't, I don't know, is there such a thing as over-communicating? Maybe we over-communicate now. But we have Infinite Campus, which is great. From the front office, we send out at least one. We try to narrow it down to one, but sometimes we get different things, you know, thrown at us at different, not literally, but you know, hey, we need to push this out, we need to push this out. So we try to do it once a week from the front office with all the different dates and interesting things that are going on at the school. You might get a few, and I apologize for those weeks that you get 2 or 3 or 4, which I think might have been last week for our intent and open enrollment type pieces. But I feel like we've gotten a lot better with our communication, so now in the parent surveys, please check that we over-communicate, and then I'll feel like we've done a good job. PTO has Facebook. Molly runs the Facebook, Mrs. Tomlin, and she does a wonderful job. And we just started, I just started doing a Twitter account. I am not good at Twitter. I will get better, so please add to my 20 followers. Thank you. I haven't tweeted since before break, I believe, but I'll have to tweet something. Culture of Success, also part of Journey 2020. This is our Bobcat. His name's Zoomer. The students named him Zoomer last year, so when you hear Zoomer's Fun Run, it's the Bobcat, but his name's Zoomer. It's kind of fun. Our Culture for Success. I love this school for many different reasons, but pride in the pack is pretty rampant. PAC, meaning positive, achieving, compassionate kids. Every week we do, on Fridays, there are video announcements which Mrs. Gutierrez and the Media Club run, but there are acknowledgments to students every Friday for showing pride in the pack. They get awards, and then their name is stated on the announcements, and a little bauble comes back. Also, we have awards assemblies. We have very important person breakfast, which is twice a year, and those are invitation-only pieces to individuals in a teacher's class, which is kind of neat. So there's a lot of recognition. You hear the words pride in the pack. It's kind of neat when I'm outside of Basha, or I'll see, oddly enough, saw a student in Payson, and they're like, so pride in the pack, was that your, you got it, when I'm sledding, all right, let's do it. So it's caught on, it's great, and I think the kids understand what that means, showing pride in the pack, and I hope it really does carry throughout their lives, and that whole cultural piece in providing, you know, making sure that they understand that, yes, academics are important, we focus on academics, but it's also important to be a good person and treat people with respect and show pride in the pack. I will not sing this for you, but to speak about Basha, last year we debuted the fight song. I believe it was last year, maybe it was the year before, but it's caught on. It's to On Wisconsin. If you like On Wisconsin, I sure do. So does Mrs. Moore, who's from Wisconsin. But this was created, and I tell you what, we try to sing this every single time we get together and have an assembly, and it's really pretty cute. There was a video, but due to time, I'm not going to show it, and due to that, it was at the end of the 4th through 6th grade assembly where there was a few of these faces. You know, they were excited to sing it, but it was a long assembly if you were there. Thank you for coming and being patient. So visions for the future. This is my clip art for climate. I didn't know what else to put up there. But we're going to continue to work on our climate, building a culture of pride in the pack, being positive, achieving, compassionate kids, and finding other ways to identify those kiddos doing great things. Spotlighting them on the announcements, different things like that, allowing them to showcase some of their work on the announcements or in their class. Mrs. Tubolino runs our Pride in the Pack. Every month we have a focus This month it's compassionate. You'll see it in the front. There's extra homework assignments. They're not really homework assignments. They're something I hope that children want to do at home. They're not for a grade. It's just to show, here's how we're compassionate. It's like it's a log, or it's a picture, or it's something to do at home to help build some of those character skills as well. I think this has been up for 2 years straight. It's going to be on there again. This is our next step for thinking maps. It's called Right from the Beginning. At the point that we want to implement this, it's going to come. I'm not sure if it'll come next year, because with the math adoption, that's a lot for teachers to learn, is math adoption, and this right from the beginning piece. It's very intense. So it is in the future. It may not be next year till possibly January or even the following year. But we do want to make the link of thinking maps to writing. And this is one of our many smart boards that PTO has purchased for us. They're in specific rooms, but we do want to focus on technology. Mr. Noter spoke about that we are going to focus on getting COWs, which stand for Computers on Wheels. In case you're wondering, some people are like, what's a cow and why are you buying them? Computers on wheels, so we have more computers for students to use so that we can assess more frequently, because also Think Central, I don't know if you're aware of this, also has a testing component that can be done online, automatically grade those kiddos' work so you understand where your child is at. So in order for us to be more efficient with our testing and just get more information as we try to figure out how we can assist, how we can enrich or accelerate or intervene, we will need more technology. So thank you to PTO for having a technology account. We will have a technology committee, and when that does happen, we'll put it out in our Infinite Campus blast, and we'll invite pretty much the public to give their information. If we have a great response, we might do a survey first and then narrow it down. But we do want your input as we spend those funds on technology. So that is the end of our third annual State of the School Address.